$260 every single second. That's how much money is spent in Las Vegas casinos. That's more than $8 billion a year, or $1 for every person on the planet. In Vegas, gambling is a way of life. Many supermarkets have slot machines. There's even a prison that had its own casino for the inmates. There's a reason they call it Sin City. Most people seem to love this. Vegas was recently named the most popular tourist destination in the US. That's over Disneyland and New York. But not everyone is a fan. Up until 2017, Las Vegas had no major sports teams. The leagues were convinced that gambling would eventually destroy their sports. The NFL in particular worked hard to cut Vegas out of sport. Ads for the city were usually blocked from NFL broadcasts. Fast forward to today, and there's Formula One, the Golden Knights and the Raiders. There is even talk of an NBA franchise headed by LeBron James. Then there is this year's Super Bowl. Just a few years ago, it would have been unthinkable to see a Super Bowl hosted in Las Vegas. And yet, here we are. This is a story about the Mafia, a billion-dollar industry, and the future of sports. Welcome to Athletic Interest and how Sin City became Sports City. Much like disease and terrible fashion sense, the earliest form of sports betting came to America with the colonists. It started with horse racing, but quickly spread to new sports like boxing, baseball, and cockfighting. These games were largely unregulated. Criminal gangs took advantage and pressured athletes to fix competitions. Sports betting was forced underground and into the hands of the Mafia. In darkness, it began to eat away at the foundations of sport. For example, when 8 members of the Chicago White Sox were charged with intentionally losing the World Series final, they had been acting on behalf of a Mafia betting syndicate. America was shocked, and public opinion. Betting in sport leads to corruption. 1 year later, the National Football League was born. The NFL was determined to keep its competition free from suspicion and adopted a hardline anti-gambling policy. The league even lobbied the government to enact laws that limited gambling. Like the Wire Act of 1961, signed by President John F. Kennedy. This specifically targeted sports betting rings run by the Mafia. Kennedy was shot dead a few years later. There is a conspiracy that his hardline laws against the mob and their gambling operations could have led to his death. Officially, JFK was killed by a lone gunman with no connection to the mob. In the 70s, the NFL became more aggressive. The league began lawsuits against several states in attempts to stop the spread of sports betting. The biggest enemy was Las Vegas. Vegas had legalized gambling back in 1931. Next to Sinatra, Presley, and 15-minute marriages, gambling made Vegas one of the most entertaining cities in the US. To understand why this annoyed the NFL in particular, you have to look at this map. Vegas was one of the only places in America where sports gambling was legal. Betting on the NFL became one of the top attractions. In a 30-year period, $40 billion was bet on football, far more than any other sport. There wasn't much that the NFL could do to stop Vegas. The league chose instead to cut off the entire city. No franchises, no Super Bowls. Athletes were not allowed to even be pictured in casinos. Adverts for the Vegas Tourism Board were banned from NFL broadcasts. When other states voiced plans to join Vegas, the NFL took their fight to Congress. Their argument was the same one from the 1920s. Betting on sport creates corruption. Congress agreed. The Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act essentially banned sports betting everywhere but a select few states. Follow-up laws in the early 2000s ended the rising threat of internet gambling. The NFL had won. All it had to do now was ignore Las Vegas, and its world would be untouched by the sin of gambling. Which brings us to February 2024, the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. How did we end up here? Over decades, the NFL had trapped Vegas and gambling on the other side of a big wall of legislation. Then, the Supreme Court knocked the whole thing down. In May 2018, the Supreme Court ruled the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act to be against the Constitution. States were now free to regulate sports betting themselves. The majority chose to legalize. The NFL was on its own. That was until they noticed something interesting. Before legalization, unregulated sports betting hit a value of $60 billion per year. The legal market will soon double that figure. How could the NFL justify leaving all of that money on the table? The league had two choices: continue to pretend gambling didn't exist, or embrace the change and make some money. The NFL chose option 2. In fact, it jumped in headfirst. The NFL now has a vice president of sports betting. Deals with all of the major sportsbooks. There are now so many betting adverts during the games, people have started to complain. $1 billion. That's how much the NFL should earn over the next 5 years, just from gambling deals. So is that it? Someone waves $1 billion at the NFL and it abandons any moral objections to gambling? It's a bit more complicated. There is another, deeper motive behind this shift. To understand that, we need to look at the NFL's website. Specifically, in this sentence here. The NFL doesn't just create sport anymore. It's entertainment. Football is competing with Hollywood, TikTok and YouTube for our attention. Any factor, however small, that hooks people into football will be exploited. In recent years, several studies have concluded that gambling makes sport more entertaining. People watch more games. They watch for longer. They are more focused. People are 2 times more likely to turn off a game if they don't have any money at stake. Betting can also create an emotional bond between the gambler and the team or athlete. In many cases, people become fans of the teams they bet on. The simple act of risking your money on sports can be intoxicating. The NFL realized it can use this to hook us in for longer. A guaranteed audience. The NFL's $10 billion per year broadcasting deal is the biggest in the world. It has been built on the idea that people love football and always will. But if engagement falls off, so will the size of the deal. But there is still one problem. The NFL has spent decades convincing people that betting is bad. How does it change its message? And that's where Las Vegas comes in. This Super Bowl will be a defining moment for both sides. For the NFL, it's a chance to rewrite the narrative. It's time to live in excess. There is no better example of this than the advert for the 2024 Super Bowl, which encourages fans to party as hard as possible. Las Vegas has a similar motivation. It doesn't want to be Sin City anymore. It wants to be something bigger, more mature, the biggest entertainment venue on the planet. What does that even mean? We get a hint from a recent change to the city slogan. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas has become, what happens here only happens here. The iconic strip became famous for casinos, wedding chapels and drunk tourists. Now it boasts Formula 1, NHL, NFL and the Super Bowl. There is also this strange sphere building. You have probably seen these images before. The MSG sphere cost more than $2 billion to build. Thanks to its display, it will form a focal point across all of the future events held in Las Vegas. Each of these elements form part of a bigger plan. To change public perception. This is not an easy task, but it's clear why sport was chosen to take center stage. It's the ultimate form of entertainment. The numbers already look good. Sporting events have added around $2 billion to the local economy. The local community now has several sports teams to get behind. That transformation seems to work. Even the press is starting to refer to Las Vegas as a sports city. And the best is still yet to come. There is talk of LeBron James opening an NBA franchise in Las Vegas. He reportedly plans to play out the end of his career in the same team as his son. Sounds like a Hollywood story, but it looks like this one will be written in Vegas. Historically, the NFL and Vegas were complete opposites. One focused on sport over entertainment, and the other seeing how far it could push the boundaries of entertainment. Today, the NFL wants a taste of that excess, while Vegas wants to mature. Their interests are now aligned. They both want to be the #1 entertainment asset in their categories, the #1 city and the #1 sport. We have just witnessed the complete transformation of a city. That's the power that sport has. When it enters your town, things will never look the same. And when it leaves, there is a big hole to fill. Just ask the people of Oakland, who are losing their baseball team to Las Vegas.